here is a video I'd like to share with the public on the state parks of a specific region in New York State. Within the United States, there is a National Park Service, and within each of the states and territories, there are state parks authorities. And then underneath that, on the lower level of government, there are county, town, village, and city parks departments. Within New York State, we have the distinction of having the first state park in the United States at Niagara Falls. But there are also other scenic state parks that could be described as the flagships of the system, places such as Bear Mountain with its zoo, Revolutionary Fort, hiking trails, boating, swimming pool, and picnic areas within one park where you could spend an entire day. Likewise with Letchworth Gorge and Minnewaska and Watkins Glen. And in the urban part of the state, there's Brooklyn Bridge State Park. All of the state parks can be seen from the roads with their distinctive brown highway signs and road signs that tell you this is a park. And the region that I'd like to focus on now is Long Island, just to the east of New York City, historically comprising of Brooklyn, Queens, Nassau, and Suffolk counties. But Brooklyn and Queens are politically, socially part of New York City. So geographically and socially, it's Suffolk and Nassau counties that are considered by most New Yorkers as the region of Long Island. I'm going to give you this tour going from west to east, from Valley Stream State Park near the border of Queens to Montauk Point State Park at the eastern tip of Long Island. So let's begin. The story begins even before Robert Moses, but so much of it has to do with Robert Moses. New York City is a New York State's master builder, or power broker, as Robert Caro called him in his title of his biography on Robert Moses. He was New York City's construction coordinator, able to provide school money to parks and parks money to schools by having playgrounds next to schools, able to provide parks money to highways and highway money to parks by creating parks along the shoulders of highways. And one of those highway examples are the Parkways. Inspired by Frederick Olmsted's Eastern Parkway and Ocean Parkway, roads with parks along their shoulders, he created these highway parkways. No intersections, no bike trails or pedestrian paths, but green edges to these limited access highways open to passenger cars only. In Long Island, we have the Southern State Parkway and the Northern State Parkway running east to west. Even though today they are known for their commuters, but they were designed for vacationers and travelers as a leisurely path across Long Island. And along the Southern State Park, we have some of the earliest state parks in the system. Down here is a map from 1933 from the Long Island State Parks Commission, showing us Valley Stream State Park, Hempstead Lake State Park, and the soon-to-be decommissioned Meadowbrook State Park, which I'll get to later. Likewise with Massapequa State Park, which I'll get to later, and Belmont State Park, which is the office of the Long Island State Parks region. Further east, you have Sunken Meadow, the large beach on Long Island Sound, Wildwood, a beach and a campground, Orient Point, a beach, and over here you see Gardener's Point, which is a proposed state park that did not really get developed and was later decommissioned. But we'll get to that later. Also Hither Hills, Montauk Point, and Fire Island State Park, along with Gilgo and Jones Beach can be seen here with Hexer on this 1933 map. Robert Moses, like I said, a lot of the cityscape and landscape of New York City and its suburbs can be attributed to this man who in reality never owned a car and never drove a car in his life, even though so much of the car culture of the region is attributed to Robert Moses. A man who was ahead of his time. You can see a picture here of a parkway on Long Island running through farmland, but today surrounded almost entirely by tract housing with just a little bit of green space along the highway, all that's left of a much more rural Long Island. An image here of the Grand Central Parkway paralleling Union Turnpike in eastern Queens, and another image here of another parkway built by Robert Moses. But not everything that he wanted built became reality. For example, here he is looking at a model of the Brooklyn Battery Bridge, which was vetoed by President Franklin Roosevelt on national security grounds on the eve of World War II. So instead, this became a tunnel, and thankfully that's why it does not get in the way of the city views from the Staten Island Ferry. So that's Robert Moses. Now, when we think of Long Island, we might ask, why do we need state parks out here? After all, most people on Long Island are homeowners. They got backyards, but backyards don't really allow for socialization. Because when you live on Long Island and you have children, you become a children's schedule. You got to schedule play dates for your kids, as opposed to a park where you make friends naturally and unexpectedly, by serendipity, by chance. parks are very important for democracy, bringing people of different backgrounds and walks of life together, because you don't choose who gets to be in the public park, but you get to meet them there. This is a view of Levittown, made famous in a song by Billy Joel, and a postcard textbook example of suburbia. I mentioned that so many of these suburbs are connected by parkways and highways. All the parkways of Long Island given identical looking logos with the Montauk Lighthouse and a letter for each parkway. The two main highways for trucks here are 495, the Long Island Expressway, a spur of Interstate 95 that actually does not connect to Interstate 95, because in the east, a bridge across Long Island Sound was never built. In the west, a highway across Midtown Manhattan was never built. So it really runs from the Midtown Tunnel to Riverhead. Highway 27, State Highway, partially an expressway in Suffolk County, and a highway with traffic lights in Nassau County. This is Highway 27, Sunrise Highway. So let's start. Valley Stream State Park was opened to the public in 1928 at just 97 acres, mainly its playground, picnic area, and nature trails along the two branches of Valley Stream, the eponymous brook that runs through this park. Previously, before being a state park, this was a land reserved for Brooklyn's water supply. But as the city of Brooklyn became more populated, Long Island could not quench the thirst of Brooklyn. So in 1898, in a referendum, Brooklyn voted to join Manhattan and Queens and Bronx and Staten Island in the city of Greater New York, and able to tap the watersheds of the Croton, Delaware, and Catskill watersheds. After the decommissioning of the reservoirs and supply streams on Long Island, they were given to the State Parks Authority. This is Valley Stream State Park, Southern State Parkway running along the northern edge of this highway. But this park used to be much bigger in 1928. It used to have Cornell's Pond at its southern edge, a former mill pond that was used as a freshwater beach until about 1951, when suburban population grew, car ownership grew, and the residents of the village of Valley Stream said, not in my backyard, too many people over here. And by 1958, the state had alienated the southern half of Valley Stream State Park below Hendrickson Road, giving that part of the park to the village. It is now a village pond. The former beach instead was created into a public swimming pool at the southern end of the Valley Stream Pond. So Valley Stream State Park was once much bigger, but not so much anymore. Continuing on along the Southern State Parkway, the next park is Hempstead Lake State Park, which opened in 1928 at 784 acres, giving us fishing piers, nature trails, bridle path for horses, picnic areas, and an education and resiliency center that opened in 2021. Here in Valley Stream State Park. Also includes a carousel donated to the state parks by millionaire and philanthropist August Hexer, who later in the 1960s became the New York City Parks Commissioner. Further east, you'll hear there's a state park named after August Hexer. This is Valley Stream State Park. The lake here is also a mill dam, originally built for a grist mill near Eagle Avenue, Eagle Mill as it was called. Later on became a drinking supply for the city of Brooklyn, and later on became the centerpiece of the state park. The state park's old maps you can see from 1870, originally a supply for Nassau County as well as it was for Brooklyn. Later on in this 1890s map, you can see some of the modern streets laid out here across the farmland. Picture of the mill, picture of the state park in the Brooklyn Daily Eagle when it was first proposed. And Southern State Parkway initially ran around the reservoir in a jug handle shape, but later by 1950, it was stretched across the lake as it is today on a causeway. There's a nice observation deck in the park that was also built in 2021. Reminds me of one of those upstate campgrounds, but nope, it's here on Long Island. Next one is the queen of the state parks on Long Island, opened in 1929. This is Jones Beach State Park, 2,413 acres, 5.4 million visitors a year. It includes 2 outdoor pools, a famous outdoor amphitheater for the concerts, a beach on Zacks Bay, a marina for boats, Ocean Parkway, Bay Parkway, connected to the mainland by Meadowbrook and Montauk Parkway, and a water tower, providing the water for the showers and the pools here, built in the Venetian style. Jones Beach has 2 great books written about it, one from a postcard series, Arcadia Publishers, another one, this cool neon font, Jones Beach, an illustrated history, strongly recommended. This is a mix of Art Deco and Venetian style of Jones Beach State Park. And the newest thing on Jones Beach State Park is the Energy and Nature Center, which opened during the pandemic in 2020. And it's one great reason to come to Jones Beach during the off season. It is this beautiful LEED certified building at the western tip of Jones Beach. What happened here? This western field used to be very close to the ocean, but the current along Long Island's South Shore carries the sand and the water towards the west. And so the barrier islands kept on growing and the sands kept on extending further out into the ocean, extending the land, but resulting in the West End bathhouse and parking field being further away from the water's edge. And so that bathhouse was decommissioned, demolished, and replaced with this beautiful nature center. Jones Beach also has an air show, Christmas light show as well, and mini golf and a small pitch and putt golf as well during the year. Further east of Jones Beach is Gilgo Beach State Park, opened also in 1928, 1,223 acres, but this is left undeveloped by design on purpose as a nature preserve operated by the state. The only way to access Gilgo Beach State Park is either on the new Ocean Parkway bike trail, which opened a few years ago, connecting Jones Beach to Captree State Park at the other end of Jones Beach Island, and the Ocean Parkway. You drive through it, you feel like you're in a prairie or a desert, but you're still here in New York. Gilgo Beach State Park also has a fishing area called Sore Thumb, a peninsula jutting out into the Fire Island Inlet with permits. 4x4 vehicles can go there and go fishing. There's also a private community there called Gilgo Beach, which is enveloped by Gilgo Beach State Park, one of a few communities on Jones Beach Island that survived the condemnations of Robert Moses and having that beach an isolated lifestyle. Beware of the storms, though. Next one takes us inland. This is Bethpage State Park. Yeah, biblical name because in the 19th century, there was also a place in Long Island called Jerusalem with Jerusalem Avenue, connecting Bethpage to what used to be Jerusalem. I believe that's now Uniondale or something to the east of Hempstead. Bethpage State Park is 1,477 acres. It hosted the 2002 and the 2009 U.S. Open on the Bethpage Black golf course, but the state park also has a picnic area, playground, bike paths connected to the Southern State Parkway by the Bethpage State Parkway, the smallest and least developed of our state parkways. And believe it or not, in the 1950s and 60s, also skiing and sledding in Bethpage State Park using those hills for a winter purpose. Sadly, today, there are no public ski areas on Long Island. The closest you have to go to is in Rockland County or in northern New Jersey, but I hope it comes back. Wouldn't it be nice to use those hills for skiing? But this is Bethpage State Park, formerly a private clubhouse given to the public in the 1930s, 1934. Here's a rare picture of Robert Moses riding on a motorized vehicle. This is in 1934. Robert Moses declaring the People's Golf Club here at Bethpage State Park. North of Bethpage State Park is Trailview State Park, open only in 2002. This post-millennial state park, just 454 acres, but runs in lengthwise for 7.4 miles. What the High Line is to Manhattan, this is Trailview State Park to Long Island. It was initially supposed to be the northern extension of Bethpage State Parkway, to be known as Comet State Parkway, connecting Massapequa State Park to Bethpage State Park to Comet State Park at the northern end of Long Island in Suffolk County. But opposition to the highway from local residents resulted in a rare cancellation of a Robert Moses project, but remained DOT property. That's why it was never developed into tract housing. So snaking its way between the backyards and suburban houses is Trailview State Park. Next one takes us also inland on North Shore of Long Island, an example of the Gatsby lifestyle of the Gold Coast mansions of Long Island's North Shore. This is Planting Fields Arboretum, which became a state park property in 1949 when it was inherited by the state from William Robertson Coe, who purchased this property in 1915, this 400-acre botanical garden of Nassau County. Yeah, like New York City has a botanical garden, all of its 5 boroughs. Well, this is the one for Nassau County. It looks like a Thomas Kincaid painting when you go there. Look, an English-style garden, Planting Fields Arboretum. This is a picture of Coe Hall, where Mr. Coe lived, him and his wife. And this is an image of it from when this was a private property, and you can access the mansion and the gardens as a state park today. So even as some of the other Gold Coast mansions have been subdivided and demolished, this one will always be there. Now, I talked about undeveloped and decommissioned state parks. I mentioned Robert Moses used highway money for parks, parks money for highways. And on this 1920s map, you have Meadowbrook State Park, Montauk State Park, and Massapequa State Park. These parks were designed as right-of-ways for highways. These parks run along streams that give you their names, Wantaw Brook, Meadow Brook, because condemning land is expensive, painful, politically sensitive. But to build a highway along a creek, well, there's already available land along the creek, even though it means the destruction of habitat. But that's how Robert Moses rolled. So many of his highways, like Hutchinson River Parkway, Bronx River Parkway in New York City, and similarly here in Nassau County, designed as parkway right-of-ways. A picture of Robert Moses here with one of his construction coordinators. Here, a picture of Meadowbrook State Parkway and Montauk State Parkway from a 1930s Brooklyn Daily Eagle. Initially, you can see it was called Jones Beach Causeway and Meadowbrook Causeway. And here's Loop Parkway, the smallest of the parkways connecting to Point Lookout, Long Beach. Now, a lot of the old Hexer maps show you a picture of the parkways colored green because in the days of Robert Moses, parkways were administered by the New York State Parks, not by New York State DOT. Today, the parkways are administered by the DOT, but go to New York City. A holdover of that Robert Moses policy is the fact that New York City's parkways are run by the New York State DOT, administered jointly by the New York City Police and New York City DOT, but the green shoulder space along New York City's parkways are New York City Parks Department lands. So that's an example of how Robert Moses' policies still carry over into today. The shoulder lands along the Monto and Meadowbrook Parkway have been given to Nassau County. So the Twin Ponds Preserve was supposed to be Montauk State Parkway. Today, Twin Ponds Preserve is administered by Nassau County. The undeveloped southern extension of Bethpage Parkway through Massapequa State Park. Today, Massapequa Preserve is operated by Nassau County. So another undeveloped state park or decommissioned state park. Continuing on, what was supposed to be the northern extension of Bethpage State Parkway, known as the Comet Parkway, takes us to Cold Spring Harbor State Park. Opened in the year 2000, only 50 acres, with cliff-hugging trails overlooking Cold Spring Harbor. From this vantage point, it looks like one of those fjords of northern Europe. These inlets carved out by the last ice age, which melted between 12,000 and 10,000 years ago. And by 6,000 years ago, the sea level close to what it is today assumed its form. Further north, the northern tip of the proposed Comet State Parkway, on a peninsula that's almost an island, this knob of land, occupying almost a third of that knob, is Lloyd's Neck, and this is Comet State Park, given to the state in 1961 at 463 acres. This horse riding farm was formerly the home of Marshall Field III, who acquired it back in 1925. And though it's seen hard times during the Great Depression, the estate was preserved and later on given to the public. Notice in this area, there's a lot of bluffs overlooking Long Island Sound gradually eroding into the water. I remember as a kid, I used to go to the Sands Point Preserve in Nassau County and slide down these bluffs, unfortunately contributing to the erosion. I was just a kid. Please forgive me. I won't do that anymore. Here you got horse riding, nature trails, and an estate. But as many things with Robert Moses, they were unrealized plans for Comet. Comet, by the way, is the native name for Lloyd's Neck. Lloyd was the colonial family here, and then when Marshall Field III purchased the former Lloyd estate, he restored its indigenous name to the map, Comet. But Robert Moses wanted a golf course here at the northern tip of the parkway. But come on, we got a lot of golf courses on Long Island. How many more do we need? And instead, nature is preserved as it is. Besides a golf course, besides the Comet Parkway, Robert Moses also wanted to create a North Shore Parkway running from Glen Cove through Bayville and Center Island and Lloyd's Neck Comet into Eaton's Neck, Asheroken, down towards Sunken Meadow State Park. Thankfully, this was not built. Inside Comet State Park, there are historical signs telling you about the Lloyd family and the Field family and their contribution to the natural and human history of Comet State Park. Going on, continuing into Suffolk County, we're now back to the southern shore. Belmont State Park is also named after a millionaire, August Belmont, the horse racing millionaire who gave us the Belmont Stakes and the Belmont State Park. Belmont Lake State Park, its centerpiece is Belmont Lake, which has a bird sanctuary islands in the middle, just 3 of them. Boat rentals inside, the headquarters of the Long Island State Park Authority, later on the Long Island region of the New York State Parks. The old mansion of Belmont was demolished in the 1930s. I guess Moses felt that mansion was too much to maintain. Instead, we'll just build a more humble offices for state park workers. Large playground in there, but also the state park continues south with its red nature trail along Carl's River, one of Long Island's internal freshwater streams, down towards Amityville and Babylon on the south shore, closer to Merrick Road, Sunrise Highway. This is Belmont Lake State Park. Here, a picture of Belmont's mansion. It's no longer with us. But you know what? A remnant of Belmont's estate is still with us. The cannons that used to stand in front of his mansion are still there, as well as the pine trees on the median of Southern State Parkway and the western approach into the state park. Between those trees used to be the access road to Belmont's mansion. That access road is gone. Instead, the highway now runs along the edges of these pine trees. Now, as part of the agreement of the state's acquisition of land for the parkway and the state park was to preserve those pine trees running for somewhere between a half and a quarter mile there, these pine trees of Belmont, and a nice historical sign there too. The next state park is Captree State Park at the eastern tip of Jones Beach Island. Captree State Park became a state park in 1954, 343 acres. What Sheepshead Bay is to Brooklyn, Captree is to Nassau County, home to Long Island's largest public fishing fleet on public parkland. Private boating and boat tour operators take you out into the Great South Bay, Hewlett Bay, and the Atlantic Ocean for fishing. It is connected to mainland of Long Island by the Robert Moses Causeway. Sadly, this causeway, built in the 1950s, does not have a walkway for pedestrians or bikes. 3 lanes in each direction. It'd be nice if one of those lanes could be decommissioned and given to the bikes and the pedestrians, but no, I don't think that's happened. I mean, it happened on the Brooklyn Bridge, but let's keep in mind that the bike community in New York City is much more politically influential than it is on Long Island, where cars are still the kings of the road. But who knows, maybe in my lifetime we'll see pedestrian access across the scenic Robert Moses Causeway. But inside the Captree State Park, there's of course picnic areas, nature trails, playground, and a fishing pier as well. I saw there were old pictures of a beach at Captree back in the 1950s and 60s, but not anymore because Fire Island Inlet has very dangerous currents that connect the Great South Bay to Atlantic Ocean. There's also on the other side of Captree State Park, the State Boat Channel, sort of like Long Island's entry to the Intracoastal Waterway connecting Jones Beach to Gilgo Beach to Captree. That's here. Next one I want to show you before we move on is Captree State Park is connected by the Ocean Parkway Coastal Greenway operated by the state DOT in connection with New York State Parks. Opened also in this millennium, connecting the Monto State Parkway to Captree State Park alongside Ocean Parkway, historical signs along the way, Art Deco inspired rest stops for bikers, but it is like 40 miles to go back and forth from Merrick on the mainland of Long Island across the Montauk Parkway to Jones Beach to Captree and then back. It is a pretty long ride, but almost entirely flat, the Ocean Parkway Coastal Greenway. Next state park is Robert Moses's Fire Island State Park, originally called Fire Island State Park. This is now called Robert Moses State Park. It was given that name in the 1960s, so even before he died, when the extension of the causeway connected to the state park. Originally just one bridge. There was supposed to be a second bridge, but was never built. Just like Jones Beach, Robert Moses State Park has its own very beautiful water tower. Where there are plans for bathhouses here, instead there's just changing stations, no swimming pools, just bathhouses without pools, and outdoor beaches, very natural shoreline, a lot less crowded than Jones Beach, so very much worth a visit. But a lot of people go to Fire Island's Robert Moses State Park. They come here to park at the furthest easternmost field and hike to the Fire Island Lighthouse, which is within the Fire Island National Seashore. Fire Island, just like Jones Beach, has been extending eastward. In 1825, the tip of Fire Island was where the lighthouse is. By 1900, it was closer to the Captree Point. And then by 1960, closer to where it is today, a spit of land called Democrat Point. Not sure how it got that political name. Perhaps refers to the idea of democracy rather than a specific party, even though historically this part of Long Island is more Republican. And across from Democrat Point, this accretionary spit, is Sore Thumb, the part of Gilgo State Park, open to those with permits. But like with many Robert Moses dreams, Fire Island's Robert Moses State Park was part of a much larger plan by Robert Moses. The parkway that runs through Robert Moses State Park, Robert Moses State Parkway, is supposed to extend through the entire length of Fire Island. But if you read this book by Christopher Verga, Saving Fire Island from Robert Moses, The Fight for National Seashore, Fire Island's home to nearly a dozen communities with year-round and summer residents, a popular vacationing spot. And the people in those communities fought back against Robert Moses, arguing this is a unique habitat, a unique seashore, and it would be ruined by the highway. And as a result, the highway abruptly makes a U-turn at the border between the state park and the national park. And the only way to get national park is either hiking there from the state park or taking ferries from Patchogue and other communities on the mainland side of the Great South Bay. Fire Island, I should also mention, is the oldest state park on Long Island, which became a state park designation in 1908 when the former Surf Hotel was acquired by the state. Surf Hotels was used as a quarantine station for immigrants with illnesses. So even though we think of Ellis Island, we don't think so much about Fire Island as a place of immigration, but it was. Surf Hotel later was demolished, damaged by a storm, and there's no hotel today on within Robert Moses State Park, but you could visit there for the day. Back inland we go onto the inland side of the Great South Bay. The next one is Hexer State Park, acquired by the state in 1929 with the help of August Hexer, purchasing a very large estate that was initially known as Deer Range State Park, after the deer. Many of them live in the park. This park had a swimming pool, but it was damaged by Hurricane Sandy in 2011. It just stands there abandoned, covered with graffiti. For up to me, the outdoor pool in Hexer State Park could be used for concerts, roller skating, maybe a skateboarding park, perhaps legal graffiti and art space. I'm thinking McCarran Park in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, by New York City Parks, which was abandoned in 1984, and until about 10 years ago was also used for art and dance and music. But I hope the state park department hears this video and gets my creative ideas. You can have them, please. Yeah, it does have an abandoned pool, but you know what it does have that is open to public? Beaches on the Great South Bay, no waves because of Fire Island blocking the waves of the Atlantic Ocean. So if your child is afraid of the big waves, go to the beach at Hexer State Park. You can go to the picnic areas, playgrounds here. There's a marina here for boats, and looks like glamping, big trend. These nice postmodern wooden cabins for camping with a permit overnight in Hexer State Park. And you can see stars here because there's a lot less development here, further away from suburban housing and further away from the city. So come here to see the Milky Way at night. Connected by Hexer State Parkway to the Southern State Parkway in a loop here through Hexer State Park at 1,657 acres. Next state park, by the way, I should also show you Hexer State Park is located at the mouth of the Connetquot River, entering Nichols Bay at the Great South Bay. So continuing upstream in the Connetquot River, another one of Long Island's great freshwater streams, is Bayard Cutting Arboretum. Initially, I thought Bayard Cutting was a verb. No, it's a noun. Bayard Cutting, it was the name of the industrialist and lawyer who had an estate out here with grounds developed by Frederick Law Olmsted, the architect of Central Park and Prospect Parks, as an Olmstedian landscape designed for a private landowner. Yeah, so it's not about cutting trees, it's about Bayard Cutting. Bayard Cutting Arboretum was given to New York State in 1936 at 690 acres. Also a place where you can have a picnic, observe the plants, has a cute little constructed island in the Connetquot River, Long Island Railroad on the northern edge of Bayard Cutting Arboretum State Park. Further north, huge sizable preserve. This is Connetquot, not Connecticut, Connetquot River State Park Preserve. Connetquot State Park, acquired by the state in 1973, 3,473 acres. Formerly a hunting preserve used by a who's who of late 19th and early 20th century New York society. This is where they went hiking and hunting. But by 1973, it was given to the state. The former hunting club is open to the public as a visitors and nature center. A bit of Long Island, the way it used to be, as the entrance sign to Connetquot River State Park Preserve. Now we give you the smallest state park on Long Island at only 52 acres. So smaller than Val Stream, is Brentwood State Park. What Randall's Island is to New York City parks, Brentwood is to New York State parks, entirely designed for athletics, with soccer fields and baseball fields and a playground with a sports theme. Brentwood State Park is also one of our newer state parks on Long Island, acquired in 2003, part of the former property of Pilgrim Asylum, the Pilgrim State Asylum. But as the state deinstitutionalized and many of the former asylums were demolished, decommissioned, subdivided, a portion of the Pilgrim land was given to private development. Some of it became Suffolk County Community College. Some of it became North Middle School, and the rest became Brentwood State Park. So from state mental purposes to state recreational purposes. Next state park is near the headwaters of Nissaquag River. This is Caleb Smith State Park, acquired in 1963 at 545 acres, formerly known as the Wyandanch Club, also formerly a hunting club, but before that, it was the property of Caleb Smith, a colonial period landowner, the great grandson of the founder of Smithtown, the Smith family giving the Smithtown its name. Caleb Smith State Park, originally called Nissaquag River State Park, but later that name was given to a newer state park that was further downstream, and so the name was instead renamed to Caleb Smith in honor of its history. And Caleb Smith's house is there as a visitors and nature center. The park borders on Blydenburg County Park. So county and state park next to each other, continuous parkland along the Nissaquag River. in Smithtown. Further downstream, as I mentioned, Nassau River State Park, also post-millennium, acquired in the year 2000 at 521 acres. There are still a few abandoned buildings left there from the Kings Park State Hospital, also an asylum. Kings Park used to be in Brooklyn, Kings County. It was later moved on to Long Island, further away from the city, where there's more pastoral landscape. But again, as the state deinstitutionalized, the mental asylum was decommissioned. It would be nice if these buildings could have been used for residences, for hotels, for conference centers, for schools, right? Yeah, but instead the buildings are gradually being decommissioned, with some of the buildings still given a new use, but most of the former Kings Park buildings are not in use if they're not already gone. Very flat landscape along the Nassau River, and right next to Nassau River State Park is Sunken Meadow State Park. When Jones Beach is to the south shore, Sunken Meadow is to the north shore. Huge park with a golf course, picnic areas, hiking trails, and a beach. This is the sandiest beach on the Long Island Sound that I've seen. And I would not be surprised if Robert Moses brought sand here, either from the bottom of the Long Island Sound or from the ocean side of the island, because that's exactly what he did with Orchard Beach in the Bronx. So what Orchard Beach is to New York City parks, Sunken Meadow is to New York State parks, and has a boardwalk along its beach and bluffs overlooking the Long Island Sound. Sunken Meadow State Park, acquired in 1926, 1,258 acres. It is co-named after Governor Alfred E. Smith, just like Robert Moses, a promoter of many public projects, parks, roads, and schools throughout the state during his time as governor, Alfred E. Smith. This is some older images of Sunken Meadow State Park, just when it opened with its huge parking lot. And the toll booths are being preserved as historical landmarks within the park for their interesting 1950s architecture, even though who likes toll booths? Unless you like the Adam Sandler movie Big Daddy, where he worked as a toll booth operator. This is a postcard from the early days of Sunken Meadow State Park. Continuing east along the north shore of Suffolk County, Wildwood State Park. Wildwood State Park, the former property of Norman G. Mitchell, acquired by the state in 1925 at 772 acres. A popular campground, from camping to glamping in Wildwood State Park in Wading River of Suffolk County, with forests and bluffs on the Long Island Sound, and a beach as well, near the widest point of the Sound, overlooking Connecticut. Further east, Halleck State Park Preserve, one of the newer ones, acquired in 2005 at 225 acres. Initially, it was called Jamesport State Park, but it's not actually located in the village of Jamesport. So instead, it was named after a pond inside, Halleck Pond. Before it was New York State Parkland, it was belonged to Keyspan. Before that, Long Island Lighting Company. This was proposed as a site for a nuclear power plant. There were two nuclear power plants proposed for Long Island, one at Shoreham and one at Halleck State Park. Both Shoreham and Halleck Pond did not become reality because of opposition from local residents, especially after the 3 Mile Island disaster in Pennsylvania. Yes, nuclear power is clean, but it does produce its own nuclear waste, and it could blow up and create a much bigger disaster. So instead of nuclear power, this state park amidst the farms and vineyards of the North Fork of Long Island. Yes, lots of wineries here, lots of farms here, but they are also under pressure from tract housing developers. And little by little, some of the farms and vineyards are threatened by developers. Thankfully, the farms that border on Halleck State Park Preserve have a conservation easement. That means privately owned, privately operated, but cannot be developed. And there are access roads between these farms connecting to the state park. Visitor center at the entrance, also a Halleck Museum, privately operated right next to this state park. Orient Point State Park, the easternmost state park on the north shore of Long Island, located near Orient Point, the tip of the North Fork, where you can catch a ferry to New London, Connecticut. It extends here for more than a mile at 364 acres, opened in 1929. Playground, picnic area, beach, and a swing overlooking Gardiner's Bay and Block Island Sound. This is Orient Beach State Park. Now to the south shore we go. Napeague State Park. Napeague opened in 1978, 1,364 acres. Just like Gilgo Beach in Nassau County, Napeague was left undeveloped on purpose as a nature preserve with hiking trails of sand and the pines of this area. The sand and the pines here remind me of my birthplace, Latvia. And Latvia has so many pine trees. I mean, the whole country smells like pine. And the beaches near the Gulf of Riga and the Baltic Sea remind me a lot of Napeak State Park. Napeak Harbor, not really a harbor, just an inlet of the bay, separating Napeak State Park from Hither Hills State Park, which is our next description. Hither Hills State Park is among the older state parks here, built in 1924, 1,755 acres, a popular campground since the start. Hither Hills State Park also has a pond inside overlooking Block Island Sound, Napeak Bay, Napeak Harbor, and the Atlantic Ocean. Long Island Railroad's Montauk branch winds its way through the park, as does the Montauk Highway, here in the middle of the Hamptons. Montauk Downs State Park. This was only acquired in 1978, mostly a golf course with a swimming pool and a very unusual pyramid-shaped modernist clubhouse. I have never seen a golf club or a private golf course with a modernist-looking clubhouse. What happened was there was an older clubhouse here. This golf course actually developed in 1920s, 1928 actually, by Carl G. Fisher, the developer of Miami Beach. Carl G. Fisher in the 1920s had dreams of making Montauk into the Miami of the North, turning Montauk Bay and Napeak Bay into harbors for ocean-going vessels to attract European travelers. Yeah, I mean, look, Montauk is closer to Europe than New York City by only about 100 miles, but that was Carl G. Fisher's dream and included this golf course. But the Great Depression killed the dream of a Miami of the North. The architecture would not have been Art Deco. Here, Carl G. Fisher liked Tudor architecture instead. But yeah, this is Montauk Downs State Park, acquired in 1978. Next one is Amsterdam Beach State Park. Amsterdam Beach is a post-millennial addition to New York State Parks. It is a partnership between the town of Southold, Suffolk County, and New York State. Left undeveloped on purpose, just a place for nature trails between the ocean and Montauk Highway and these bluffs overlooking. This is a glacial terminal moraine shaped by the last ice age and now carved gradually by the rising sea levels and storms of the ocean. Next one is Shadmoor State Park, as its name suggests. Instead of the pine forest here, we have moorlands, windswept hills topped by a World War II period bunker, because this land sticks out to the Atlantic Ocean and the fear of a Nazi invasion, as well as fear of Nazi spies and submarines. In fact, in 1942, there were Nazi spies who landed here at the tip of Long Island in Amagansett, but they were caught, arrested, and executed. But this fear of invasion or attack created all these bunkers that are sprinkled throughout the tip of Long Island at Montauk Point at the tip of South Shore. This is a Shadmoor State Park at just 66 acres. Could have been developed. It was really because of a public outcry and a public campaign that saved the Shadmoor property from becoming more mansions, as we see throughout the Hamptons. Next one is Camp Hero State Park. Yes, our men and women in uniform are heroes. But the hero in Camp Hero was a general hero, actually born in Louisiana just after the Civil War. And he died in 1942. He's responsible for a lot of the coastal defenses developed between the world wars. So Camp Hero was named after a man whose last name was a hero. Forgot the first name, but yeah, General Hero here. Camp Hero also has this unusual looking radar tower, because a lot of defenses here are not just World War II period, they're also Cold War. Fear of Soviet satellites and Soviet spy planes. And that's why we have that here. Camp Hero decommissioned at the end of the past millennium and acquired by the state in 2002 at 754 acres. Some of the bunkers here remind me of Fort Tilden at the tip of Rockaway Beach, because throughout New York City and New York State, wherever you have a spit of land sticking out into the ocean, you have forts, some of them dating back to the Revolution and others dating back to Civil War and the Spanish-American War and the two world wars, and here the Cold War. Camp Hero borders on Montauk Point. There's a little bit of Camp Hero that was developed into private housing. It could have been all of the state parkland, but thankfully, again, public outcry, local elected officials saved the former military base as a state park. And the last one at the tip is Montauk Point State Park, which was acquired by the state in 1924, but this was public parkland, federal land since 1792. And in 1796, President Washington commissioned a lighthouse to stand here at Montauk Point, and it's been there ever since, lighting the separation between Block Island Sound and the Atlantic Ocean and the eastern tip of Long Island. It was here later that to prevent this lighthouse from being swept into the ocean because of the current that keeps on eroding the eastern tip, that riprap giant boulders were put around the tip of Montauk Point to preserve the bluff where it is. In contrast, consider the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse in North Carolina. Over there, the lighthouse put on rail tracks and moved back from the water's edge as Cape Hatteras keeps on eroding. But Montauk will be here for a much longer future. There's a radar tower here also, dating back to the 2 world wars. And there's a playground here, picnic areas, hiking trails, and also a plaque in memory of the Amistad Uprising in 1839. A group of slaves kidnapped by the Spanish was supposed to be taken from Sierra Leone to Cuba, which was then a Spanish colony. But along the way, Joseph Cinque, the leader of the group, rebelled and had a successful slave uprising, demanding that the Spanish crew take the ship back to Africa. But instead, the Spaniards decided to take it north to the United States, where the crew were released and the former slaves were arrested again and put on trial. Should they be given to Spain as runaway property or given their freedom as free men that they were? Defended by former President John Quincy Adams, Joseph Cinque and the former slaves were recognized as free men. And in a rare example in the 400-year history of slavery in the Americas, the slaves of the Amistad were able to return to Africa as free men. But their ship crashed off the coast of Long Island. So that's Long Island's connection to the Amistad. There's also a plaque here for the Montauk Point Lighthouse, a National Historic Landmark that was designated.